2025 was an interesting year in the world of birding. From milestones to cultural phenomena, some of the biggest events of the year were not on my bingo card for 2025, but here we are. In this video, I want to reflect on some of those events and think about how it might change birding in the future. First up is what has to be the biggest news of the year, the introduction of AviList. This was a huge effort to unify one global bird taxonomy, one taxonomy to rule them all. I won't go into all the details of it because there are great explainers out there, like Cornell's Introducing AviList video, or the paper in July's Biodiversity and Conservation that explains the why, how, and who of AviList. I'll link both of those in the video description. I'm only restating the obvious to say this is a monumental effort and it will hopefully make the future of communicating about birds easier. There are positive conservation implications, but for most of us it means cleaner and more correct bird lists. I had always hoped the BOU's treatment of common teal and green-winged teal as separate species would get accepted by the AOS, giving me an armchair tick on my main list, but AviList really put the nail in that coffin. I do feel fine with the redpoll lump, as separating hoary from common sometimes felt like a study in confidence of just how much white is enough white, but now we can save those arguments for the Corys versus Scopoli shearwater debates. Anyways, now instead of having major competing taxonomies, we have AviList to fix everything. But it does feel a bit funny to have AviList unveiled and immediately see eBird stop short of fully adopting it. I know this is huge and people don't like change, so getting it right is important. I appreciate that eBird actually acknowledged some of the controversial changes by AviList with explicit hesitation to change. To quote their latest taxonomic update, they say, "While it remains a goal to align as closely as possible with AviList, we want to make sure that we don't adopt a change, such as lumping ruddy and Andean ducks, modify eBird records, rewrite Merlin text, retrain Merlin sound ID and photo ID models, and rewrite 2 Birds of the World accounts and then realize the following year that AviList has again adopted the split." So while we very much support AviList and the consensus taxonomy that it has implemented, there are a few cases where we plan to delay action for a year or two and to attempt to mount proposals with additional evidence. So I'm really excited for AviList and the future it promises, but during this bumpy transition time, I can't help but be reminded of the classic XKCD comic, How Standards Proliferate. You start with the situation. There are 14 competing standards. 14? Ridiculous. We need to develop one universal standard that covers everyone's use cases. Yeah. Then, the situation, there are 15 competing standards. That joke aside, I do feel as eBird moves closer towards global domination, whatever their taxonomy is going to be the one that we all use. At least from a birder's perspective, I know that I'm too reliant on eBird for tracking all of my lists, especially outside of the US. That, and I wouldn't fight any decision eBird made over AviList anyways. There are 2 side stories to this that I think are also notable for a 2025 birding wrapped. The first is the dramatic update to the story of Peter Kaestner being the first person to see 10,000 species of birds. This was big news when it broke in February of 2024 that he was the first to hit this amazing milestone. Then we got the short-lived controversy with Jason Mann, who claimed to have beat Kaestner to the title by a few hours, only to reverse the claim a short time later, blaming bad record keeping. Well, now in 2025, with AviList being the ruling taxonomy, Kaestner's list dipped below the 10,000 mark again. Kaestner did get to 10,000 species for eBird's taxonomy by the end of October this year, then on November 11th got to 10,000 based on AviList taxonomy. So now we actually get to celebrate this incredible milestone. And let's say congratulations, Peter, on being the first birder to see 10,000 birds in the world. The other AviList adjacent story I wanted to mention was eBird coming out with personalized taxonomic reports this year. For the first time, you can go into the My eBird page and within Download My Data, there is a link to request a personalized taxonomic report. From there, you'll get an email with a link to a PDF that includes the changes to your own list, showing the species that were lumped or split and what the net change was to your list. It's a pretty nice move there, eBird. Other noteworthy eBird updates this year was the fix to the app tracking your distance. and expanding the media that you can upload to your list. I've got these videos specifically on those topics if you've missed them before, and I've heard that there are some big updates coming to hotspot pages, and you can bet I'll have videos about those as soon as they roll out. Last year I made a video on the best field guide of 2024, which was undoubtedly Amar Ayash's Gull Guide. This year felt a little lackluster on the field guide front, but from a personal note, I did acquire a couple new monographs during the holidays that I'm excited to dive into. I'm also working on a video reviewing all the field guides to the birds of the West Indies, so make sure you're subscribed and you don't miss out when that one drops. I think the next biggest event in birding this year was the release of Listers. With over 2.5 million views, Quentin and Owen Reiser gave the best view into competitive birding by fully immersing themselves and partaking in some of the funniest shenanigans along the way. Most interesting to me is how Listers became more of a cultural phenomenon, transcending the strictly birder audience and really spreading into the mainstream. I'm amazed at how many non-birders have talked about this, even getting attention for their unique approach to releasing the documentary on YouTube with monetization off. I highly recommend listening to Owen's interview on the Colin and Samir show for their discussion of the creative decisions around releasing the film. It is hard to make any real comparisons, but fun to think about how The Big Year, with a $41 million budget, only made $7.4 million in the box office. The average price of a movie ticket in 2011, when The Big Year came out, was $7.93. So fewer than 1 million people went to see it in theaters. Meanwhile, Listers, with a $16,000 budget, was watched by over 1 million people within a month of being posted. I'm curious to see what kind of impact, if any, Listers has on future birders. I know people that got into birding after watching The Big Year, and it is interesting to see more specifically competitive birders getting into the hobby as a result of these movies. And everyone can bird their own way. That is the fun part of this hobby. But I wonder if there's any people out there that will watch Listers and think that they don't want any part of this crazy hobby. My guess is no, or hopefully not, especially because I love how the risers themselves experience the burnout and the joy that can be lost from a very list-first mentality. I'm pretty excited to see what comes next from the Reiser brothers. The teasers they are posting of their current project on the ivory-billed woodpecker are helping build the hype for sure. I'll end this one on a more personal note. Despite not getting in as much birding on my own, I still had my biggest year in terms of total species seen. This was aided by a couple tours I led for work, hitting Southeast Arizona in the spring, and then an Ecuador trip in November. In my home state of Maine, which is really the only list I care about, I did manage to add 3 birds this year. A self-found cerulean warbler at Evergreen Cemetery in Portland was a real treat during the warbler walks that I lead there each spring. I lead a daily walk for 2 weeks every May, and this was the 11th year of doing that, so it was about time I got to find a cerulean. The tufted puffin was my biggest nemesis and required its own video to tell that story, and I finally got black-throated gray warbler for the state. This was only the 8th record for Maine, but I've had really bad luck with the past ones, most of them being one-day wonders or sometimes just a single sighting before taking off. This year I had a well-timed trip to Monhegan Island, one of the best migrant traps in the Northeast, and after a stressful time of feeling like everyone else was seeing the bird but me, I eventually relocated after breakfast on our second day out. Quick pro tip for you: if you get married at a great place for birding and do it during migration, you'll have a lifetime of romantic anniversary trips that also coincide with great birding. Let me know in the comments what some of the big birding news was for you in 2025. I did just hit 3,000 subscribers, so I want to thank those of you that are subscribed and helping me grow this channel. I'm excited to get more videos out in 2026 and hopefully pick up a few new birds along the way. Happy New Year, everyone, and thanks for watching.